session. Bakken 2.0, crack the code. If there's one thing that I'm pretty excited about here first out of the gate is that we've got a special video that I'm going to show you, but you know, this is I think one session of this conference that everybody came here for. And over the next 90 minutes, we're going to walk through the technical case, the policy case, and the operational case for what comes next in this basin. And we're going to do it with some of the most accomplished leaders in American oil and gas. Before we begin, we have a special message from one of the strongest champions of North Dakota oil and gas in the United States Senate, U.S. Senator John Hoeven. He's recorded a brief message for us about Bakken 2.0 and the work that we have ahead of us all. Let's hear from him now.
Thank you for the invitation to your conference. It's a pleasure to speak with you. In North Dakota, we cracked the code on the Bakken more than 20 years ago by building a pro-growth business climate that encourages investment and innovation. Thank you to all of our state's oil and gas producers for your hard work, which has helped make our state into a global energy powerhouse. Now we're working to repeat that record of success by partnering our coal and oil industries through an initiative I'm calling Crack the Code 2.0. We're advancing the use of enhanced oil recovery, or EOR, to not only double oil recovery in North Dakota, but double the life of our coal-fired electric power plants. In order to get there, we've secured $36 million from the Department of Energy for the EERC and its partners to develop a large-scale demonstration project to prove the commercial viability of EOR in the Bakken. This federal funding is the final piece needed to move forward on the first phase of Crack the Code 2.0. When combined with the $45 million in state funding and $76 million in private investment, our total Phase 1 funding comes to $157 million. This initiative is crucial to U.S. energy dominance, as it has the potential to unlock at least an additional 5 billion barrels of oil out of the Bakken, while also giving coal producers access to a new revenue stream by selling CO2 to oil producers. Importantly, we know this approach works because it's already used in conventional oil fields. Our efforts are further bolstered by a policy we passed in the One Big Beautiful Bill that properly incentivizes the use of CO2 injection for improving oil recovery rates. We're also working to secure a new 5-year, $25 million cooperative agreement between the Department of Energy and the EERC. This cooperative agreement had been in place since 1983, but the Biden administration failed to renew it. We went to work with the Trump administration, specifically Energy Secretary Chris Wright and his team, to reach a new agreement which will provide certainty for the EERC and support its critical work in the Bakken. In these ways, we are working to ensure our state continues to grow as a global energy leader and make our nation truly energy dominant. Thank you to everyone in attendance for your efforts to advance these important goals. Best wishes for an enjoyable and productive event.
Thank you, Senator Hoeven. We deeply appreciate the continued advocacy for North Dakota and our industry and your work in Washington to keep this basin's interests at front and center. Your efforts are appreciated and they've made a difference. Let me set the stage for what we're about to discuss. Bakken, as we're all aware, has produced more than 5.5 million barrels of oil, but the experts in this room, the Department of Mineral Resources, the operators, the ERC, they'll all tell you that we've only recovered somewhere between 8 and 15% of the oil in this endowment. This means the Bakken still has tens of billions of barrels that are left to give. And the question's not whether the oil's there, the question's whether we're going to crack the code and precisely how we're going to get it. Cracking the code is not just one thing. It's a whole stack of things working together. It's enhanced oil recovery, CO2 injection, surfactants, natural gas reinjection, and moving from pilot scale to commercial scale across the basin. It's longer laterals, better completions, learning from every well that's been drilled, and learning from every well that's going to be drilled. It's the geological work that's telling us where to put the next pilot, and the data infrastructure telling us in real time whether it's working. It's also the policy and the regulatory framework that lets operators take the risks on the next pilot without losing years to permitting. Here's what makes this moment different than any other in the 75-year history of this basin. We have alignment that we've never had before. The Bakken 2.0 initiative, led by the EERC, Lynn, Helms, and the Department of Mineral Resources, has every major Bakken operator working together on the technical roadmap. On the federal side, we have a Secretary of the Interior who used to chair our Industrial Commission, an Assistant Secretary of Energy who knows this basin, who's now our Undersecretary of Energy, and a National Energy Dominance Council that's treating American oil and gas as a national priority again. Operator, researcher, state regulator, federal government, all rowing in the same direction at the same time. That's the window we're sitting in, and that's what this afternoon's about. This afternoon, we have a remarkable lineup to walk us through the work, starting with a leader from one of the most important operators in the world. Pam Heatherington serves as ExxonMobil America's General Manager and as the Chief Executive Officer of Denbury, leading ExxonMobil's upstream business across the Americas and its enhanced oil recovery and carbon solutions work through Denbury. She brings decades of experience across upstream operations and carbon management, and her perspective on the Bakken's role in ExxonMobil's strategy is one that we've been eager to hear from. Please help me welcome Pam Heatherington to the stage.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. ExxonMobil is honored to sponsor this event, to be a member of the NDPC, and to be an operator here in North Dakota. I grew up in Canada, and I spent 3 years in our Wyoming operations, and so there's a sense of kindred spirit every time I'm here in North Dakota. I think it's the state's respect for hard work, love of the outdoors, and devotion to the great game of hockey that makes me feel right at home. So thank you for having me. I have to say, it feels like there's a spirit of celebration at this event. We certainly have a lot to celebrate this year. In a couple months, we'll celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Here in North Dakota, we're celebrating 75 years of oil dominance and the role our industry plays in driving economic growth, creating good-paying jobs, funding critical infrastructure, and supporting the local communities. And at ExxonMobil, we're celebrating 20 years as being part of the North Dakota business community. Across the state, I get to see the great work that our ExxonMobil team does to provide the energy the world needs. Their commitment to doing things the right way, the innovative approaches they take to increase recovery and reduce emissions, and their consistent efforts to be a good neighbor. Their hard work and innovation enables us to be a major operator here in the Bakken, where we've invested more than $1 billion since 2022. And we currently produce more than 150,000 barrels of oil equivalent every day. At ExxonMobil, we're focused on maximizing the long-term value of the natural resource, being the most responsible operator, and deploying our technology advantages. We invest in a way that's thoughtful, prioritizes our long-term presence in the state, and responsibly stewards the resources that we've been blessed with. It was President Teddy Roosevelt who said, "I recognize the right and duty of this generation to develop and use the natural resources of our land, but I do not recognize the right to waste them." It's that spirit and that shared sense of responsibility that motivates our team to provide the energy and products that enable modern life while keeping our people safe and reducing emissions. It's why we invest in new technologies like lightweight proppant, next-generation cube design, 4D seismic, remote monitoring, and artificial intelligence. The list goes on. To take an example of our seismic technology, we're using high-performance computing to enable real-time visualization of the subsurface that enables better well placement and increased resource recovery with less capital, which is a key theme of a lot of what we're going to talk about here today. With these technologies, we can now do in about a week what used to take months to optimize recovery, which opens up new opportunities. Our competitive advantages of scale, technology, integration, execution excellence, and most importantly, our people, create real value. Across the corporation, we plan to invest $100 billion in major projects, most of which will start up before 2030. These investments reflect capital discipline. We're investing in the right things in the right place to generate strong returns and long-term value. From an upstream perspective, this means growing our portfolio competitively with advantaged assets, including those here in the Bakken. And we do that by leveraging our unique set of technologies, optimizing our base portfolio, and driving out cost. But our commitment to North Dakota doesn't stop at the wellhead. We, with our peers, are continuously investing in the communities where we operate. From infrastructure and employment to working with local nonprofits, collaboration happens at every level. We were excited to donate $1 million to support the construction of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library, which opens on July 4th. It pays homage to President Roosevelt's values of leadership, citizenship, and conservation. And each year, we're proud to support those who serve our communities. We focus our charitable giving in the Bakken, supporting local schools, first responders, and other critical services. I'll close with this. Oil and gas is a vital engine of economic growth in North Dakota, in the United States, and around the globe. The people in this room are the cornerstone of America's energy security, and there's so much to be proud of in how this industry works hand in hand with the communities where we live. Thank you for your leadership, your insights, and your commitment to providing the world the energy that it needs. I'm looking forward to a fun discussion on enhanced oil recovery here shortly, and to meeting as many of you as I can over the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Our next presenter is Vishal Gupta, President and General Manager of EOR Ventures for Oxy. Vishal leads Oxy's enhanced oil recovery business, the company's industry-leading work on CO2 EOR, and the next generation of recovery technology. Oxy's expertise in EOR is unmatched in the United States, and we're very glad that Vishal has been able to join us here today and share these growth opportunities and his perspectives. Also, his insights as to what they might mean for the Bakken. Please welcome Vishal Gupta.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. Today I was going to share a high-level overview of some of the growth opportunities we see for EOR going forward, both at the macro level as well as for Oxy specifically. So I wanted to start off by sharing some information from a study that Oxy and McKinsey recently conducted together around the overall industry-level trends of oil and gas supply and demand. So on this slide, you'll see a chart which shows the U.S.'s oil production history over the past 100 years, followed by a forecast over the next 50. What you can see here is that conventional oil production in the U.S. peaked back in the mid-1970s and then was declining thereafter. Then, in the early 2010s, we had the shale revolution, which led to significant growth in oil production across the US and led to the US gaining an energy dominant position. This energy dominance in turn led to many different benefits. It helped stimulate job growth, it provided lower costs of energy to consumers, it provided our industries with a competitive advantage, and ultimately provided us with geopolitical strength. Now, that being said, shale production growth in the US is now starting to slow down. In the prior decade, shale production grew at around 15% per year. In this current decade, shale production growth has slowed down to around 5% per year, and we anticipate that within the next 5 to 8 years, shale production will peak and then be on a fairly steep decline thereafter. So whereas the US currently makes up about 15% of the global oil supply, this could be as low as 3% by the year 2040. We believe that one of the most meaningful ways to offset this production decline will be through enhanced oil recovery, both conventional EOR and unconventional EOR. We estimate that there's about 70 billion barrels of commercially recoverable oil using enhanced oil recovery, of which around 7 billion barrels is right here in the Bakken. So we believe that it's critically important for us to start investing in EOR now so that we can offset this decline and ensure that we continue to maintain all the benefits that we have over the past decade of having energy security. In addition to that, we have a tremendous opportunity to also decarbonize our industries if we use CO2 for EOR. With the recovery of over 70 billion barrels, we're going to require around 35 billion metric tons of CO2 to recover this. So not only is this an opportunity to grow our oil production, but it's also an opportunity for us to future-proof our industries going forward. So that provided a high-level overview of the supply of oil. Now I wanted to touch on the demand. So overall, global energy demand is expected to grow through the year 2040. There are many different scenarios in terms of how much of that energy demand will be met by oil and gas versus other energy sources. But in a mid-case scenario, we anticipate that around half of the global energy demand will continue to be met by oil and gas by the year 2040, which on an absolute basis is very similar to the oil and gas production today. And then in the US specifically, we expect that oil and gas will continue to be the primary energy source for this country. We believe that without EOR, there could be a gap of between 4 to 10 million barrels a day between our expected supply of oil and the expected demand by the year 2040. So hopefully that builds the case for why EOR is critically important for the future. And now I was going to touch on some of the growth opportunities that we see going forward for EOR, specifically at Oxy. So I wanted to start off with just a little bit of background about Oxy. Oxy is one of the largest CO2 EOR operators in the world. We operate a number of conventional CO2 floods located in the Permian Basin. As a part of these operations, we inject around 2.3 billion cubic feet a day of CO2 and sequester up to 20 million metric tons on an annual basis. While many of these conventional assets were discovered back in the 1930s and 40s, we are still able to produce a significant amount of oil just because of the way that the EOR process works. And this oil production has a very shallow base decline rate of just 5% per year. In addition to that, we have tremendous growth opportunities for EOR in our portfolio. We estimate around 4 billion BOEs of recoverable resource using EOR in our conventional and unconventional reservoirs. Oxy has over 5 decades of history managing CO2 EOR projects, and over the years, we've developed a number of in-house proprietary tools for maximizing the value of that CO2, and we've gained the experience on managing CO2 EOR operations both safely and efficiently. So now I wanted to touch on some of the growth opportunities in our conventional reservoirs for EOR. One of the biggest opportunities that remains in our portfolio is to convert existing water floods into CO2 floods. This has really been the bread and butter of what Oxy has done for many years. In addition to that, we have opportunities to CO2 flood a deeper zone within our reservoirs known as the residual oil zone. The residual oil zone is one that has been naturally water flooded by Mother Nature, and the only way that we can recover this oil is through CO2 injection. Oxy has been doing CO2 flooding in the RAWs now for many years as well, and there's tremendous growth opportunity across all of the Permian Basin to continue to expand RAWs development. In addition to that, our teams are continuing to innovate and improve the returns on these legacy CO2 EOR projects in our conventional reservoirs. Our teams have developed a better understanding of the subsurface and are applying new and innovative pattern designs as well as new facility technologies to really improve the returns of these projects. Another big growth opportunity that we have for EOR in our portfolio and our conventional reservoirs is through improved conformance. So typically, even after CO2 flooding a reservoir, around 40 to 50% of the oil remains behind. The CO2 is actually very effective at recovering the oil when it comes into contact with it, but because of the heterogeneity in the rock, there's a tendency for the CO2 to go into the highest rock quality layers, leaving behind oil in the poorer rock quality layers. So our teams have been advancing new technologies like polymer-assisted WAG and foam injection to redirect more of that CO2 injection into the lower rock quality layers. With these technologies, we believe that we can recover an additional 5 to 10% of the oil in place. And finally, Oxy is very excited about the opportunity to expand EOR into our unconventional reservoirs. Oxy has been studying unconventional EOR now for the past 10 plus years. We've done a lot of lab work and simulation studies, and at this point, we've also done multiple pilot projects of using high-pressure gas or high-pressure CO2 through a huff and puff process in unconventional reservoirs. And what we've seen from these pilot projects is that we can typically see around a 40 to 50% uplift in recovery using this process. So we are now commercializing this into a business. We are beginning our first 3 commercial scale projects in the Permian Basin. We have a pipeline of many more to follow in which we can recover over 2 billion barrels of resource. These projects also have a very shallow base decline rate of just 7% per year. Our teams are continuing to find new ways to add value to these projects through subsurface optimization to improve the recovery. We're also working on new facility designs that can lower the upfront capital costs, and we're also working towards land consolidation to be able to do these projects at an even larger scale. So in conclusion, at Oxy, we are very excited about the future of EOR. Not only do we think it's an important part of our portfolio, but we think it's an incredibly important part of the future for U.S. energy security. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishal. I'd next like to invite John Argo to the stage. Excuse me. John serves as the Vice President, Williston Basin for Continental Resources. Continental is one of the active operators in the Bakken and has been at the forefront of basin innovation for decades. John leads Continental's Williston Basin operations, including the company's pioneering work on Bakken EOR pilots. Please welcome John Argo.
Thank you, John. Thank you guys for having me here today, and thank you to NPC for all that we do here, all you guys do here in North Dakota and for our industry, and it's been good to partner with you for a long time now. I think they're pulling my slides up here, but while they do that, I have had the chance now to be involved at Continental since 2014, and so about 12 years. For that first, call it 9 years with the company, was working mainly in corporate roles on business development teams and corporate reservoir teams. In these past 3 years, I've had the opportunity and the blessing to be a part of our Williston Basin team. And being Oklahoma born, being a Sooner, both from growing up as well as being there at the University of Oklahoma, I've got a lot of pride in Oklahoma. I've had the chance to work in a few different states across my career. Hadn't worked North Dakota individually until the opportunity for this current role. And one thing I've shared with my team members the past couple of years is just the sheer appreciation for the men and women of North Dakota. This industry, as you all know, is a phenomenal industry. This state, the community of oil and gas energy in North Dakota is just really second to none. And it's hard to say it, but North Dakota is, in my opinion, from an oil field perspective, tougher than our fellow Oklahoma oil field. It's just a different environment up here that the teams have to manage and navigate. And talking with some of my superintendents one time, we were asking, after being involved with the team for a little bit, like what is it that just drives this kind of unique grit, determination, no nonsense, just get her done oil field mentality? Because it just seems prevalent across it all. And whether it's the right answer or not, it sounds like one general statement is the ancestors and those that came before us that did everything here in North Dakota, from the community to the industry, with an environment around you all, around these communities that's actively trying to kill you for a few months of the year. You really just can't get through that without having that determination, that grit. Either you left or the alternative happened, right? So really appreciate the opportunity once again to be here to speak. It may be up here in a minute, but I'll just kind of start going into what I was planning to talk about. I figured I could, before we get on to the conversation of EOR, I was just going to highlight a little bit more about where we are today as Continental. Looks like it might be up there now. Can you guys see it too? All right, thanks. So Continental, we are really proud to be the largest private company in this industry. And we're really proud of being an American company, and that all that our industry does, as you all know, that is so critical to not only this country, but our allies across the globe. Energy is important and critical, underlies every industry, everything we do, and all the prosperity that it drives. Going private a few years ago, having been public for about 15 years before we went back private, I was very privileged to be a part of that process in some way, shape, or form. But ultimately, taking the company back private, we have seen just such immense benefits from that, just freedom in all that we do, and there's so much to that. Where we are today, so 4 main basins here in the United States, the Williston Basin being our largest current operation. We've been in the Williston now for over 30 years, and there's so much. I'll talk more about our Williston presence and our Williston commitment here a little bit later. But that's where a lot of this unconventional story of Continental started, is the Williston. Anadarko Basin is our second largest producing asset. Oklahoma assets, great optionality asset with both crude, natural gas, liquids, and also from pure dry gas. And then we entered, the Continental story was really those 2 basins for quite some time. We entered the Powder River Basin and the Permian Basins here a few years back, and those have been really great growth engines for the company. And frankly, as I'll talk about more, we've been able to leverage what we learned in North Dakota and in the Bakken, in the Three Forks, and all that unconventional development, optimization, delineation, execution into these 2 new plays, and that's been a really phenomenal growth story for our company. The most recent expansions of Continental have been international. So if you may have seen some of the announcements around it here, it's been something we're really proud of. It's been an intentional focus for these past couple of years, but maybe here both within Turkey and with Argentina, there's a similar story, similar underlying around, can we leverage those same skill sets, once again, honed in the United States, in these unconventional plays, and can that be exploited and leveraged through our operations and partnering with others across the globe? And we believe we can, and we believe we'll be successful in doing so. So this slide is one of my favorite slides, about the history of not all 60 years of Continental, but maybe the unconventional story of Continental. And so it starts here on the far left, and for those who remember, Jack Stark was one of our longtime leaders at Continental, and explorationist and passionate, and one of the original members of the team that helped us delineate, along with Harold and others, the Williston Basin years ago. He would have this slide on his notebook. Like, he would go into meetings and it would just be there. It didn't have the annotations on there, but just that up and to the right, that growth, that exploration DNA of Continental. Because that's what, frankly, we all really appreciate at Continental, is that growth mindset, organic exploration. And if you start at the very far left here in the early 90s, Cedar Hills, this was the first horizontal oil field ever drilled, once again, 100% horizontal wells. And if you go back to the technology back then, I can't even imagine how the men and women associated with those projects were able to accomplish what they did. But ultimately doing that in the early 90s, taking that horizontal mentality and go, where else can we leverage this? And that's kind of the whole point of this slide, and the point of, even as we get into EOR, is where else can we leverage this? You take it to go to the right here, it was, all right, well, can we leverage this in the Bakken? And ultimately, Elm Coulee, Montana was the first that approach, and then expanding into North Dakota, later expanding that into the Three Forks. But as you're seeing that, all right, now we're seeing horizontal development, horizontal technology, multi-stage fracturing technology, it's working. It's unlocking this unconventional tight shale resource. The Continental team was, where else can we leverage this? So that same age rock, that Devonian, Mississippian age rock of the Three Forks in the middle Bakken, that is also present in other basins. So took that back to Oklahoma, and that's what you see with these evolutions of all the Oklahoma Woodford plays that ultimately were unlocked with that same technology. Fast forward years later, whenever we've now entered into the Permian Basin, we're also leveraging this once again in that same Devonian, Mississippian section in addition to the Permian section and other zones. But then you fast forward, now you see the entrance into the international opportunities. And like I said, I think Governor Armstrong yesterday highlighted this is the basin in Williston, the oldest oil shale, that ultimately has demonstrated so much, not only to Continental's teams, but to the industry of what can we be done? How can you unlock this awesome resource we have? I think the EOR, as he said, Williston Basin has that chance to lead once again in EOR. How can we do this unconventionally, and how can that then be leveraged elsewhere as well? Been here for 30 plus years, and we're very proud to be here for a lot longer. Just wanted to highlight a few more things here. The amount of evolution you guys have heard on different panels throughout the past couple of days and conversations about just the continuous innovation we're seeing in the Williston Basin. And these few slides here, I think, highlight some things we're really proud of. The longer lateral trend, as you've heard many times before, but that is a very, very relevant, very, very prevalent. And the fact that we are today now seeing that fourth mile, and in many instances seeing that the performance is not degrading in that fourth mile, that's a huge step, because it took us a long time as an industry to get confident that that third mile was going to produce as much as that second mile. So just the continuous learnings of the industry, how we're doing this effectively well and lifting those wells, but this trend is only going up and to the right, and we're really proud that we're drilling 4-mile wells and completing those in North Dakota today as well. And then on the right side of the slide, this is just highlighting just how that efficiency continues to compound. These wells are drilling so fast today, we're talking about 2-mile wells in, frankly, 1 day. I don't think we've quite, as an industry, hit that number. I think us and Cord and others are close, but 2 miles in a single day is almost there from that lateral footage, which is just magnificent. And then these last two notes here on Williston productivity, the left side is showing the stimulation efficiencies. So just as fast as we're drilling these wells, we're taking the same approach on stimulation effectiveness. We're essentially pumping twice as much proppant fluids in these wells in the same amount of time we used to. From the simul-frac technologies to remote frac technologies, just ongoing efficiencies on our stem side. But that's really all together the cycle time improvements this drives, as well as the cost efficiencies, are helping unlock what we would call maybe the next level of the Williston, the second, from a conventional perspective or for a primary development perspective, that call it tier 2 rock, that maybe years back had a much higher cost of supply threshold. These cost efficiencies and these productivity efficiencies are unlocking all that, as you guys have seen. And then to the kind of punchline, maybe, the well productivity we're seeing from the, frankly, not the best rock in the basin is just really almost phenomenal. We have brought on, as you can see here, the top 25 wells of all wells Continental's brought on in the basin, so 20 plus years of Middle Bakken Three Forks development. The top 25, 16 of those came on last year. And that is not the best rock that we've developed, right? Being here a long time, we've had the opportunity to develop a lot of assets. The fact that we're bringing on this productivity, the best it's ever seen, best the basin's ever seen, and the rock we're in is incredibly encouraging to me and to the basin. And so then maybe transition to EOR. So what's that next evolution? There's numerous kinds of EOR as you've seen before, but one we talk about at Continental a lot is this huff and puff kind of common terminology, or the cyclic miscible gas injection. And so ultimately what we're trying to do here is repressurize the reservoir to original reservoir pressures and also impact those fluids near wellbore such that we can increase that mobility and bring more oil to the surface that is ultimately going to be left behind by our primary development. So you kind of see the injection period. You can use different fluids. We're using mainly natural gas, produce natural gas. Then you've got the soak period, and then ultimately the production period of flowing that back, and then cycling this. And so ultimately, we've done this now in the Williston and small-scale projects. We're about to do this in much larger-scale projects. The ones we have planned for later this year and next year in partnership with North Dakota and DIC are going to be much larger than the ones before. I think that the ones we have planned are going to be 3 times larger, so 3 times the volume of gas ultimately injected and recycled than what we've ever done in the prior projects. So scale is important. We can talk more about that on the panel. But here's just kind of maybe the punchline. Here is, you've heard the the opportunity of how much percent improved recovery we're going to get. We know we're leaving potentially 90% of the oil and gas, oil in place in the reservoir. So what can we get out of it? Well, this was a project that we did in Oklahoma, but ultimately, and this is a little bit stale. If you guys get a chance to listen to Jose's presentation, I think at 3 o'clock upstairs from Continental, he'll talk a little more detail. But this is one that's already produced more than 40% incremental barrels above the projection we would have done from primary development. So it's a huge opportunity. It's a big prize. We're excited about it. We're excited about partnering with the state of North Dakota as well as the federal government and our other partners to progress it. And I look forward to talking more here on the panel. Thank you guys for listening to me a little bit here. Go Thunder.
Thank you, John. Now I'd like to invite Pam back to the stage along with 2 additional panelists for our EOR discussion. Joining Pam and Vishal and John is Toby Deen, Senior Policy Advisor for the National Energy Dominance Council. Toby serves as Senior Policy Advisor where he advises on federal policy framework that supports American energy leadership, brings a clear-eyed view of the policy and regulatory levers that can either accelerate or stall the next chapter of basin development. Welcome, Toby. Joining me as the co-moderator for this discussion is my friend, Lynn Helms, the Bakken 2.0 project manager for the North Dakota Petroleum Council. Lynn served for 25 years as the director of the North Dakota Department of Mineral Resources, and no one in this room knows the regulatory, technical, and political history of this basin better. Please welcome Lynn Helms. So Pam, Vishal, Toby, John, let's crack the code.
Here we go.
All right. Well, I want to start by saying thank you to our panelists. It is a rare opportunity to be able to sit for an hour and talk with the people who are looking at what does the next generation of unconventional operations and development in the United States look like. So thank you all for being here. It is really a wonderful opportunity, and I appreciate your willingness to sit and answer questions and talk with our audience. Thank you all for being here. I think this is going to be a great learning opportunity. These folks sit in positions where they're seeing under the hood what's coming in terms of unconventional resources and where we're headed incrementally in increasing recovery from the unconventional resources, and also what it's going to look like to crack the code. I always like to start with where we are a little bit before we talk about where we're going. So I did a little research this morning. The world produces and consumes 71,000 barrels of oil a minute. So in the time it takes me to tell you this story, 71,000 barrels will be produced and consumed around the world. The United States produces 1 barrel out of every 8, 9,500 barrels a minute. North Dakota produces about 900 barrels a minute, and so it produces 1 barrel out of 10 from the US and 1 barrel out of 100 around the world. This is not insignificant. What you are involved in is some of the most significant work that the world knows today in terms of providing economics to the world and things that the world needs. So thank you for that. I want the attendants to all give yourself a round of applause. Thank you for being here. Vishal, I want to start with you. We've got a question. What is some key work? I know you talked a little bit about your vision for unconventional EOR. What's some key work and specific key work that Oxy is doing to scale unconventional EOR from pilots to a true field scale operation? What's some key work?
Sure, thanks for the question. So like I mentioned before, Oxy has done a number of pilot projects at this point using unconventional EOR, and we've seen really good success, which has really lended itself to the confidence that we needed to start implementing commercial scale projects. When we start talking about commercial scale projects, there's quite a bit of work and activities that have to happen to actually do this at the scale that we're talking about. The first kind of key work that our teams are doing right now is around building out field development plans. So for each specific area, we need to understand the best way to develop these reservoirs. We need to understand which benches we want to inject into, what type of injectant we want to use, what the rates and pressures need to be, and what kind of sequencing and cycle times we want to use on injection and production for the huff and puff process. All of this is very rigorous subsurface work that can help us really ensure that we maximize the value from these development programs. In addition to that, we need to then iterate with our facility and infrastructure team to design these projects in a very capital efficient way. So that really builds the foundation of these unconventional EOR developments at commercial scale. But the second item that's critically important for these projects to be done is to ensure that we have an ample supply of low-cost injectant. And so whether you're using hydrocarbon gas, CO2, natural gas liquids, or any other injectant, what we know is that these horizontal wells can take a very large volume or very large rate of injection per well. So to be able to do these projects at scale, we need a very large supply of that source of injectant. Specifically for Oxy, we're very focused on CO2 because that is where we have a lot of expertise and we have access to infrastructure. But in addition to our existing supplies of CO2, which are primarily naturally occurring underground reservoirs of CO2, we are working towards capturing CO2 from different point sources within the Permian Basin. So we're working with different industrial facilities like power plants and gas processing plants, as well as ethanol plants, to be able to offtake CO2 from carbon capture projects. We've seen a lot of good traction on this front here recently, especially with the passing of parity on 45Q for EOR versus sequestration. And then finally, the last big piece that we're working on to commercialize these projects is really building out the large contiguous acreage position that we need to be able to do these projects. So in the conventional reservoirs, I mean, many decades ago, a lot of the acreage was unitized where it was really easy then to actually do these projects at scale. In the unconventional reservoirs, a lot of the acreage position is fairly fragmented. And so we have to work with our working interest owners, royalty interest owners, and even offset operators to be able to put the right agreements in place or unitize to be able to do these projects at scale.
All right, well, thank you very much. Toby, you're running the Energy Dominance Council. And so I would like to know what you see as a council and as yourself. What role does enhanced oil recovery play in that broad energy dominance strategy that we're trying to implement across the country? What role does EOR have in that?
Well, I appreciate the question. You're going to hear from the leader of the NEDC tomorrow, Secretary Doug Burgum. He's the chair of the NEDC. I've got the privilege of supporting him and Secretary Wright and the president in a policy advisor role. The president has set a clear vision that American energy dominance is a bedrock principle for prosperity at home and peace abroad. And the NEDC, it encompasses half of the cabinet secretaries, and the president's done an incredible job recruiting energy-minded professionals who understand that importance, that it's not just a sector of our economy, it's the sector that fuels the entire economy. And the strategy that our policy is built off of is one of increasing energy supplies. We need more energy tomorrow than we have today, and we will need more the next day. And for oil and gas specifically, I'm an engineer by background. I love objective measures. For oil and gas, we need to maintain our status as a net energy exporter, net oil exporter, net natural gas exporter. You heard Undersecretary Hosfite mention some of the details of that this morning. And for our country's most prolific basins, we see enhanced oil recovery, enhanced gas recovery as simply the next phase of development for some of our nation's most critical assets. And that's a simple statement for someone from DC to make of, well, it's just the next phase of development. These folks sitting beside me that have the task of the innovation and the execution of that. But the message is one of energy addition. And the first movers, those folks sitting beside me, they started moving years ago. And so if you are a fast follower, it's time to start following fast. And so you're going to see a whole of government approach behind this effort, from our Department of Energy through funding of projects, from our national labs that were touched on this morning, from partnering with companies on relevant current research to advance the technical details. We've got industry partners here today that have signed 7-figure funding opportunities with our national lab. Take that as a challenge for all of you to go visit that lab and participate there. We also have energy dominance financing. Our director there is Greg Beard. He's an energy finance professional, comes from Apollo. These guys understand energy projects. They want to invest in projects that are north of $1 billion. And we've got 2.5 years left in this administration. And so there's plenty of funding support. There's technical support. Administrator Zeldin has taken an axe everywhere he can to overreaching regulation. You're going to continue seeing that. But for the next few decades, we see EOR, EGR as vital to us maintaining our energy dominance here in America. And the intrinsic value of that is being played out on the world stage today. And so it's hopefully resonating that it's not something we can be complacent on. We need to stay motivated, have the right regulatory economic frameworks in place to incentivize innovation, experimentation, and development.
Yeah, well, thank you. Maybe to try to sum that up, would you agree with me that we can only maintain energy dominance with a drill bit for another 10 years or so? And then beyond that, maintaining energy dominance is going to rely on things like enhanced oil recovery and improved oil recovery?
Oh, I'm never going to say we can't achieve more through the drill bit.
Okay.
We have tremendous resource here in the U.S. As you guys know, it's really just a cost of supply. What's going to be that next marginal barrel that's added to the market? We have over, tens of thousands of wells that are ripe for EOR, EGR. A lot of the existing infrastructure in place. Mm-hmm. There might need to be more. But now's the time to get that done. You've never had a more energy supportive administration in DC, and states like North Dakota have shown that with, Crack the Code 1.0. I'm fully behind and optimistic that 2.0 is going to work out.
Great, so it's not an either or, it's all the above.
It's an addition, yes.
All in addition, yeah, well, thank you. Just so you don't get used to us going in order here. Pam? Right. I'd like to hear how EOR fits into ExxonMobil's broader strategy of maximizing recovery from unconventional resources. Is it like a thing all by itself, or is it part of a broader strategy for ExxonMobil?
All right. Well, I think it's been talked about multiple times over the last couple days that recovery rates from shale are hovering around that 10%. So that means there's 90% of the resource left stuck in the rock, which means the runway is huge when we can figure this out. And this is an industry, just walking around in the exhibits today, this is an industry that is built on innovation, and the shale industry in particular is an absolute demonstration of our industry's ability to innovate, solve problems, and find a new way of recovering oil. The way that we think about the shale resource, the unconventional resource, is more that it's a technology-defined resource versus a geologically defined resource like some of our conventional reservoirs. And so to me, this is just, enhanced oil recovery is just one more tool in our technology toolbox that we are going to be deploying across our suite of technological innovations. And when you think about the runway that's ahead of us with enhanced oil recovery, it's super exciting.
Yeah, so that makes me think of how the initial code was cracked, and it was like one innovation built upon another, and then eventually a series of those innovations came together where there was a sudden burst of innovation where horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing used in cemented liners and perf and plug and long laterals all came together at the same time to see like this enormous increase in production and activity. And so is that how you see it? Is that there's a series of innovations that will continuously take place, but at some point we'll take a major up step in terms of knowledge and learning that'll be a great leap forward?
I don't know if it'll be a big bang or if it'll just be a gradual incrementing on everything that we're doing. There's obviously the economic barrier, and having the support of the federal government certainly helps move us faster through these steps of innovation. But whether it's a big bang or many incremental steps, there's so much running room that I know that we're going to make progress.
Yeah, well, thank you. Another rare opportunity. You don't often get two people named John on the same stage. So I've got a question that I'm going to ask both of you to respond to. We'll start with you, John Argo, and that is, for unconventional EOR to move from pilot scale to field-wide or widespread scale, what needs to happen in the areas of collaboration and competition and then regulation or unitization? What do you see that needs to take place in those three arenas to move this from pilot scale to true real-time scale where it's making a difference in terms of our production rates? And that would be balancing collaboration, competition, and regulation to get to where we need to be.
Well, I think it's an important question, because if you look at what's been done to date, there have been a lot of progress made, maybe over the last 5 to 7 years. There's been multiple pilot projects in North Dakota. There's been in other basins as well. We're proud to have been a part of a number of those, both in this state and in other states. But to your point, Lynn, they've been smaller scale. And those smaller scale pilots, and the bigger the field, like the Williston, for example, there's probably not going to be one project that's going to be able to represent the entirety of the basin. So you're going to need to see these done geographically. I think we are frankly going to be in pilot phase for a little longer. We're getting the larger pilots going, but we have a lot of learnings we need to hopefully accelerate, like we're all talking about. That partnership of the federal and the state funding, in addition to the industry collaboration, as you asked, I think it's going to be critical in this phase, because these are not small capital investments. The project that I alluded to, the results we saw in Oklahoma, that project started over 10 years ago, all right? 10 years ago of like the initial single well pilot, learnings from that, how do you leverage that, then go to the pilot of the full unit, then from that, and we continue to learn. And then to your question on unitization, that unitization process is going to need to be collaborative across the regulatory environment, the state environment, the other operators, the mineral owners. And so I think we have the benefit of learning to some extent some of those things that have been done elsewhere, but it's going to be also unique for North Dakota. So I think more than anything, I think we just need urgency. And I believe we're seeing that urgency. We're seeing that step up with what the state is doing on supporting projects and pilots. And these ones we're doing here coming up, ourselves and others that were awarded those grants recently, these are, I believe, in the magnitude, it's just the two we're a part of, are called $60 million of capital in 2 projects. So something that takes a lot of capital risk, and they take a lot of time as well. These are not the same, call it, risk profile that what we've been accustomed to in the short cycle of an unconventional shale well. So with that, I think we need to be incredibly thoughtful, collaborative. It's helpful to get the incremental funding from different stakeholders all working together. And then I think also we have to be mindful too, though, is there's still risking capital. So how do we ensure that we can promote and support those who are willing to risk that capital and those resources, such that there is still some competitive advantage to leverage that offsetting? I don't believe it's going to be as much as we saw in the early days of shale, where if we can figure this out, we can go lease the next 100,000 acres. But there is going to be some balance there we need to strike. So I think we're on the right path. I think that what North Dakota is doing here, I'm really proud to be at least a small part of it, working with the state on doing so. But that's urgency, and it's going to take a lot more pilots, a larger scale, and the faster we can do it, the better off we'll be. Because maybe the last thing I'll mention on the speed or the urgency around it, we are fighting a battle that every day gets a little harder. Because every day that the reservoir pressure decreases more in those existing wells, you mentioned that large set of candidates, if you will, every day that the reservoir pressure is now being depleted a little bit more, now that EOR technology most likely has a bigger hurdle to overcome. So the sooner we figure it out, the better off I think it's ultimately going to be. So we see that, and we're focused on it. The rest of the panelists up here are focused on it. The state's focused on it, and encouraged to see what that focus will generate.
Sure. So John Harju, you have lived in that world for at least 20 years, maybe 25 years, where competition, collaboration, and regulation all intersect. And I want you to speak to this issue just a little bit, and in terms of specific things that you see that you think need to happen. But I do want to announce, and I'm really pleased to announce that as of yesterday afternoon, all 4 pilot contracts have been signed with the North Dakota Industrial Commission and the Oil and Gas Research Council. So I know that all got approved last September or October. Things take time. If you don't believe that, you can talk to my friend from the Triple T Ranch, and he'll tell you that's why he named his ranch that. Things take time. They take often more time than we want, but wonderful news as of yesterday afternoon. All the contracts are signed, and our operators are ready to go to work. So John, some specifics about how you see those things interplaying, and particularly on the regulatory side, what do we know from North Dakota's past experience that we can do to make it a better world for scaling up EOR from pilot to large-scale pilot to real-world field opportunities?
Sure, thank you for that, Lynn. ERC is, I like to say we're kind of the connective tissue between a group of highly competitive companies, and our Bakken production optimization program has really been a model for that for a very, very long time. And it's an environment where we don't need to all make the same mistakes, right? We can learn from one another's mistakes instead of being cursed to repeat them. And I think about your question to Pam earlier about is this a one giant step? I like to think this is an evolution versus a revolution, right? And I think that's going to be essential, to take this to the next step. That the collaborative model is going to be really important just because of the capital intensity. And I think about the progress that we've made over, it's actually been a very long time since that first EOR pilot at the Austin well up in Mountrail County. What was that, 12, 13 years ago already? That first pilot. And it was very instructive, not highly successful, but very instructive. And we learned a number of things from that I think we've been busy on in the meantime. And as I look at this next suite of pilots, we're going 10 to 20 times larger than anything that's been attempted in this state, which is clearly one of those learnings. But a number of the others, really are toward that evolution. We believe we know how to secure conformance within the reservoir. We know already that we can mobilize oil. I mean, there's a number of learnings from those pilots over that last 15 years or so. And I actually look back and you and I have talked about this a couple of times. The state went through a process, and I'm going to turn this around and throw it back at you, Dr. H. And, we did something really revolutionary here quite some time ago, which was set up default 1,280-acre drill spacing units, stand-ups. And, that was a big move. And, my personal thought is we really need to do something very, very similar for these EOR projects. We need to come up with a standard set of units, which certainly isn't going to be one DSU, but is it going to be 16? Is it 24? Is it half a township? Whatever it might be. So I'm going to throw that one back at you in terms of that regulatory environment. What do you think? From 25 years as the chief regulator in this state, a primary architect of those stand-up 1280s, what do you think we need to do in order to be an efficient, to have an efficient rollout of these EOR projects? And I'm going to throw one more condition on it. We're going to probably not have enough working fluid to do it all at once. Mm-hmm. So there's one for you, buddy.
Well, now, something else unique. The moderator gets to answer a question. You're right, John. North Dakota was pretty innovative in terms of how it approached unconventional resources. So in 2010, we saw that we could not begin to help industry develop a 16,000 square mile oil field in a haphazard one spacing hearing at a time of all different sizes and shapes. So we collaborated with industry. We asked industry to come in, and we had one big hearing. We listened to everybody about what size and shape would be the optimum or the standard, with also the flexibility built into the system to do other sizes and shapes, which has led to 3 mile and 4 mile and now 5 mile laterals and U-turn laterals and lots of other innovations there. But there was a standard that was put there which allowed industry to move forward quickly, to trade leases and establish who had the operating interest in a spacing unit. And those spacing units or drill spacing units could be approved by the folks at DMR without having to go to the Industrial Commission. And I think looking forward, there is not the capacity to have 2,000 unit hearings over the next 10 years to set up the Bakken for enhanced oil recovery. That just doesn't exist in terms of capital allocation or personnel allocation. And so we are going to have to use these pilots and these large-scale pilots to inform us as to what should a standard EOR unit look like, and then move into a realm where the policymakers in North Dakota allow those units to be put in place quickly, to take care of the correlative rights of all the parties involved, but to move forward quickly and in a standardized and transparent and easily understood manner, so that industry can deploy capital rapidly in order to make this thing move to full scale. Because the enemy of capital deployment is uncertainty. And if they are uncertain about whether they're going to get a unit approved or what that unit might look like or how it might impact their operation, then that capital will go someplace else. So I think you're right. The 2010 experience is a model for how to move this thing forward from pilot to large pilot to field scale operations. We don't have reservoir boundaries like we do in the conventional resources. We've got to create geographic boundaries and take care of people's correlative rights within those boundaries, but without creating a huge amount of uncertainty and long delays in terms of moving that capital into the field, which is a great segue. Vishal, we're back to you. How do you at Oxy balance short cycle shale development capital deployment with the EOR investments, which are competing for capital, but they're long-term capital investments with long-term ROI? How does an operator, a large organization, find or strike that balance? And I think we're probably going to have to ask a couple of other panel members if they have a little different formula for that. But how does Oxy do that?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying that there's nothing in the portfolio that can compete with the near-term returns of drilling shale wells. And that's why we've seen so much activity over the last 10 to 15 years in that space. But that being said, EOR does have certain characteristics that make it a very attractive investment as well. The first is one that I alluded to in my opening remarks, which is the shallow base decline rate associated with EOR projects relative to the fairly steep decline rate that we have in our primary shale drilling. So typically in primary shale drilling, we see an aggregate decline rate of somewhere around 30 to 40% per year. With our EOR projects, that average base decline rate is somewhere around 5 to 7% per year. So this low base decline rate is really attractive because we can sustain production over the long term without having to pump in nearly as much capital. So in a lot of ways, EOR becomes very complementary to the shale drilling in that it can actually reduce our capital intensity over the long term of those high return projects that we get from primary drilling. The next, the next, I'd say, area and reason that EOR is attractive to us is that these are truly organic growth opportunities. And what I mean by that is we don't have to go out and acquire new acreage or acquire another company to build the inventory. This is existing acreage that we have today. We've already got wells in the ground. So a lot of those upfront costs associated with building that initial drilling inventory doesn't exist with EOR projects. So that's fairly attractive as well. And then finally, kind of just beyond economic drivers, I would say that there is a little bit of a strategic angle when it comes to investing in EOR now. I think we realize that as an industry, our inventory of Tier 1 drilling locations is continuing to deplete. And so we know EOR is going to be critically important for the future. Similar to what John mentioned, EOR projects do have a little bit longer time frame to implement. They typically take 2 to 3 years for implementation. And the reality is it's probably going to take us another 2 to 3 years to really learn how to optimize the recovery from these developments, optimize the surveillance, and really ensure that we develop these EOR projects in the right way. So at Oxy, we really like being on the front end of that so we can get those learnings under our belt, and so that once we actually start scaling these EOR projects at an even higher level, we'll be able to ensure that we're maximizing the value from those new developments.
Pam, would you like to give us a little peek into how ExxonMobil approaches that balancing process?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I alluded to it with $100 billion of investment in our business over the kind of near-term horizon. You can imagine that deploying that capital across the corporation, and I mean, we're not just an upstream organization. We've also got a chemicals business, a refining business. We've got our low-carbon solutions business. Making the decisions on how we deploy and prioritize that capital is no small feat. But like we've all been talking about, the offsetting that decline, I like to think of our unconventional business as a treadmill, and the incline rate on that treadmill just means that you're having to run harder and harder and harder to offset that decline. Finding ways to arrest the decline rate is going to be hugely important. We have grown our unconventional footprint significantly in the past few years. And so anything that we can do to slow that decline rate down or recover more from the rocks that we have, like we said, it's not necessarily a geology problem. We know that the oil is there, is going to naturally compete for capital in ExxonMobil's portfolio. The other thing I'll share is we always try to balance, what is the here and now? What are the short cycle investments versus what are the longer term kind of horizon technology projects that we should be working on? And so that is a very intentional conversation that happens during our annual plan and budget cycle, where we are making sure that we are investing for the long term, because ExxonMobil plans to be around for a long time.
Yeah, well, that sounds a lot like what I heard yesterday in the IOR panel. And if you missed that, I hope that you check it out. But there was a lot of conversation in there about how IOR was built into the CapEx of the wells from the very beginning, that it was a thought process in even the initial completion, and then thinking about at what point am I going to impose some EOR or some additional IOR into that well decline in order to slow it or to transition that well into EOR. And so it's an interesting balancing act. Continental Resources, clearly in this game, decades in the Bakken, going to operate 2 of our pilot projects, our large-scale pilot projects. You've been doing this in the Anadarko. So how do you achieve that balance? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think really well said by Vishal and Pam. It's the underlying fundamentals that they already highlighted are tough. And as us all being stewards to our investors and our stakeholders of, are we generating the best risk-adjusted return for that investment decision? I think you said it earlier, Lynn, like if we can find ways to reduce the uncertainties, because frankly, a lot of uncertainties early in any new technology. And so the uncertainties that we have with our EOR projects, they scale from the subsurface uncertainties, the infrastructure uncertainties, do you have that injectant, as Vishal mentioned, that you're going to have enough supply at the appropriate cost. One of the things that we were challenged with on that project that I showed on the screen, the results, is that when you're injecting natural gas and you're buying natural gas usually on the front end of that, and we've seen, not necessarily a really stable natural gas price environment throughout the, past number of years, you run the risk potentially in your project economics of buying a gas at a certain dollar per MCF and then producing it later at a much lower one. So you're adding that challenge, the ratio of what the crude price you're getting for the gas you're injecting, if that's going to be your injectant, that's another one of the challenges. So I think, but ultimately, just can we find ways to reduce that gambit of those uncertainties, such that the positives that Vishal highlighted and Pam did of how this complements the decline profile with the shallower decline profile, getting more out of the existing resource, leveraging those existing pieces of infrastructure and capital investment to date, that to me is really key. And I think we're still learning that. We're still trying to navigate that. And I think the collaboration with the states on helping us offset some of the uncertainty, because once again, the capital put in the ground, we have to offset that with, we could get a lot more oil near term by those upstream, call it more status quo economic considerations. Mm-hmm. So that's the challenge that we're navigating. But I think we're collectively getting there.
All right. Well, thank you, Toby. Are there some specific milestones that the council would like to see over the next few years that are going to move us from pilot phase to large pilot to field-wide implementation? Have you talked about some specific milestones that the administration and the council would like to see take place? Because we're all driven by calendars, we're driven by CapEx, we're driven by OpEx, but we've got these calendars in our mind. And if you live in North Dakota, you live by the calendar because you know that, well, we had a beautiful day today and winter's just right around the corner. So are there some milestones that the council would like to see?
Yes, ultimately, it's exactly what industry is needing, what has been talked about. When John was speaking, two things that resonate for us is scale and urgency. This administration, we've got effectively 2.5 years, right? It's incredibly difficult to repeal pipelines and infrastructure that is out in the field working, right? And those building blocks that are going to be needed for the multi-unit EOR, EGR developments is what we want to see in place. You mentioned some of the regulatory nuances, unitization, and that economic and regulatory framework for those multi-unit developments. Those are the milestones we need to be hitting. There's multiple potential pathways here. I don't think anyone believes there's going to be a silver bullet approach to this in every part of the field or every basin. And we need to see that being done for CO2, for surfactants, for rich gas. We don't know what that answer is. It's likely not one answer, but we need to be pursuing all of those at this point in time. You mentioned that competitive dynamic that exists. I'm optimistic that the collaboration that's needed will happen You know, the shale revolution was built off of a land grab, and you know, it was a bull rush mentality. Short cycle economics ruled the day. This is clearly a different business model that requires long-term value creation being of priority. And so I think with that comes a different mindset. And as industry is trying to construct those environments we talk about, whether it's regulatory or financial incentives, we need to be prioritizing that collaboration across states, across basins, across EOR, EGR types. And so our milestones from an administration standpoint, we've got 2.5 years to get things done. You know, I mentioned earlier, there's never been a more pro-energy development administration. And so we're here to support you guys. But we want to see the multi-unit developments in the ground.
All right, thank you. Well, I've got a question that I want all three of our operators to address, and that is, you go over here to the expo and you see a whole lot of service providers and technology providers and startups and research organizations and, you know, brilliant minds working on this concept of IOR and EOR in the unconventional resources. So if somebody has an idea in this space, what's the best way to engage you as an operator with that idea? We'll start down there with you, Vishal, and Oxy. What's the best way for some genius that's over here in the expo that's got a new idea that's going to revolutionize IOR to approach your organization?
It's pretty simple. Just reach out and we will answer your call, and we're always ears for any new technology that could help us out. You know, what I'd say is, you know, we often have vendors approach us, and you know, when we make a decision to move forward with a certain vendor or certain service provider, it's probably based on a couple of different criteria. The first is ideally we're looking for technologies that are somewhat complementary to our overall strategy and to the competitive advantage that we feel like we have within the EOR space. So that's really important for us. We're not trying to venture into necessarily, let's say, you know, a brand new line of business, but you know, if it's something that could help us enhance oil production, it's something that we would definitely be open to hearing about. The second, you know, from my perspective is we've got to believe in the science, right? I think sometimes we hear of solutions that I don't think we can quite wrap our head around how the physics of it actually works. And for me, to invest in something new, we ideally want to make sure we understand really the science behind of what's happening and prove it at a small scale first before trying to deploy it out in the field. And then, you know, the other piece for me is always when looking at new technologies, we need to make sure it's something that is truly scalable. You know, oftentimes we find things that may work in a lab environment or a controlled environment, but when you start thinking about deploying it to the field, there's a lot of challenges and complexities that can come about. So ideally, we need to have technologies that can truly be commercialized at scale and applied in the field for us to want to try something new out. And then obviously probably the most important is ultimately economics is what really drives the decisions. And so, you know, while the pilot itself may not be economical, we want to make sure there's some sort of pathway to making this a commercial and economic technology that we can use. But yeah, please reach out. I'll be around.
Okay. Do you have a team that's working in this space that people can talk to?
Yeah, I mean, within Oxy, there are multiple organizations that are kind of working on the technology front. We've got my organization that is more focused on enhanced oil recovery specifically, but within our business units and within our functional organization, we also have kind of technology venture teams that are always looking for new ideas and new ways of doing things. And, you know, we all are in regular touch with each other, and so if you get in touch with me, we can obviously put you in contact with the right folks.
All right. How about at ExxonMobil, Pam? What's the best way?
That was a pretty good answer.
Okay.
It's going to be hard to beat that one, but no, we do have a team here. I actually happen to be sitting kind of right up front here, but there's also a booth in the expo. By all means, if there is a novel idea, come and share it with us, come and talk to the team here. Similarly, we have a large engineering, it's a centralized engineering organization that works across the corporation to advance new technologies, innovative ways of working and thinking. Economics are always going to rule the day. It comes back to that conversation we just had about deploying capital. If we can't see a path to making this economic and competitive in the broader portfolio, it's going to be hard to inch it forward. But it always starts just with an idea, and that's where all of this began. So by all means, reach out.
Yeah, thank you. And with Continental Resources, John?
I think agreed, really well said. And I think ultimately for our team, just to specific Continental, we've got a centralized team as well. Many of you guys know Brad Aman, who's been around the Williston for a very long time, and one of his teams is responsible for all of our enhanced oil recovery efforts across all of our plays. And so they're leveraging the insights they're getting from the different basins and here in the Williston as well. And then Jose Zagul, who's going to be presenting here in the next session. You guys get a chance to go up there and hear from him and others on some of the pilots that are about to come underway. He's a great contact. I'm happy to be a contact. We've got our booth here as well. But yeah, I think maybe just to add one more additional item of what would be helpful to hear when you bring us an idea. I would say that the more it can be thoughtful also on like operationally, how is it going to be done? If it requires a certain level of infrastructure or a dynamic of that basin and that field, like having that thought through, then I think it just accelerates the process and the time for our team to work through it with you and anybody else we need to make, hey, is this going to be a very viable project? How are we going to test it and get it to work in the field as soon as we can? Back to that urgency.
All right, thank you. Dr. Harju, what kind of a role might EERC play here with connecting innovative ideas to operators?
Well, it's at the core of our existence, really. So, it's everything from our exploratory work, which is largely an internal exercise, to, most of the larger companies in the room, we do private work for, directly, and whether that's to further investigate a nascent idea or to help them mature and look at scaling an idea that looks promising, or often in that more collaborative space of how can a larger team pull us all together. So we've obviously we like to assemble teams. These are giant challenges, right? And the rewards are unlikely to flow to any individual producer. So it's I think our collaborative space is a really good one for this. So, every day new ideas come at us, and they're everything from kind of wild hares to very, very logical things. And you never know which one's going to be great. So we try to be diligent and thoughtful, and try to mature those that we can. And it's always a resource limited arena. As many of y'all know, we were once part of what's now the Department of Energy, and we enjoy a very collaborative environment with the department, and that oftentimes helps us bring resources together like we have here for the next phase of pilots in the state. So we're a culture of innovation and a culture of partnerships. So thank you.
Yeah, so doing a favor for one of these very intelligent young people that approached me the first day of the conference, in fact, during the registration period, and works in this space. The comment was, I can test this stuff in the lab all day long, all year long, but these folks have the real laboratory, which is the wellbore, and it needs to get tested in the wellbore. So please appeal to these people, was what he said, to try stuff. That's a North Dakota comment. Please try stuff. So if you would follow up with that.
Yes.
Please try stuff, yeah.
We're kind of winding down, and obviously EERC can help people to take those ideas or concepts and make them make sense to an oil and gas operator before they approach an operator with an idea. But it's great to hear that you all have teams that can look at an idea and see if it makes sense science-wise, if it looks like it's scalable, if it looks like it's something you're willing to test in your wellbore, and something that you'd be willing to look to the future to implement. We're kind of getting to the end here, but Pam, I have a question for you.
Sure.
And that is, how does ExxonMobil see the connection between CO2 EOR and long-term carbon storage? Is there a connection, or are we talking about just two different ways of getting 45Q credits? And some people do this and some people do that. Or is there a real connection between long-term CO2 storage and enhanced oil recovery? And how does that work?
Yeah, it's a great topic, fun one for me. ExxonMobil really likes to talk about the and equation, and this is a perfect example where if we're able to recover valuable oil resources that would otherwise be left trapped in the rock forever and solve simultaneously an emissions problem for some of the industrial operators at the same time, that is just the definition of a win-win. And it's something that we're doing today. We actually are the largest capturer of CO2 emissions. We've been doing it for decades in our Wyoming assets, and then with the acquisition of the Denbury assets, we've connected a 1,300 plus long mile network of CO2 transmission pipelines together, and it happens to run right through a very, very heavy industrial section of the US Gulf Coast. And so we're picking up CO2 from industrial players making ammonia, making steel, power plants, industrial gas players, and taking that. And because of the nature of the network system we have with multiple intakes and multiple offtakes, it's highly reliable and very robust. Which is great because if you're an industrial player that's going to go and invest capital in carbon capture equipment, you want to make darn sure that you're going to have a home for that CO2 eventually so that you can reliably claim your 45Q tax credit. And so that robust system that we've cobbled together is quite, it's a proof of a concept. Right now, we're doing EOR with that CO2 in conventional oil reservoirs, but we know that the concept works. We've proved that system model is absolutely going to work for us, and the next trick is taking that, expanding it, and making it happen in the shale reservoirs.
So you see it as a very connected system with all of these miles and miles of pipeline connected to storage and to EOR projects. Yes. And that all those components are a necessary part of the overall picture.
Yes.
All right. Well, we got time for a couple more questions, and I want to turn to Continental Resources and John. Let's leave folks with a couple of lessons that you've learned from your EOR work in the other basins that you think might be applicable to making the Bakken great again.
Yeah, there's a handful of them, and I'm going to give one more plug to Jose's presentation because he'll go in a lot more detail, but I will highlight that a few. So the initial completion of the wells that we're injecting into, that really matters. We ultimately, you're going to need enough conductivity in that tight reservoir so that you can get, call it the scale that John highlighted earlier that we're trying to go after. And we've unfortunately learned the hard way sometimes where we thought maybe a legacy completion would be advantageous to control containment, but ultimately there was not enough connectivity that we couldn't get the injectivity we needed, all right? So the balance of containment and frankly, the amount of connectivity to be able to inject at scale, we found really, really critical. Another thing we learned, the cyclic nature of at least the ones that we've done, right? Once again, kind of that huff and puff as the priority that we've focused on. The cycle times can be challenging from, as I mentioned, kind of the commodity price volatility if you're using natural gas specifically as the injectant. So if you have the opportunity, back to the need for unitization, to be able to go both north and south or east or west, however you're set up, to while you're injecting in certain wells, you're flowing back the other side of that pad, if that makes sense, or of that unit. That really can drive a lot of efficiencies for a number of reasons. But so back to the size, the scale, and not having just these kind of single one-directional pilots will be beneficial to the reducing that risk that I highlighted previously. And then I said it a little bit before, but just to reiterate, the reservoir pressure you're dealing with is going to be, call it directionally correlated to how much gas you're going to have to inject or how much injectant you're going to have to inject to kind of retrieve back to that reservoir pressure you're looking for. So just being mindful of where each of the wells are and the reservoirs are in their primary development phase, such that it's going to then fit with the ultimate project economics and volumes and timelines that you're going to be able to build around for that enhanced oil recovery project.
Wow, thank you. Toby, you get to back clean up. So I'd like to know how the EDC views public-private partnerships and how they can help accelerate this phase of moving from primary to EOR and cracking the code for enhanced oil recovery. Do you see a major role, and how do you facilitate that through the administration, the public-private partnership?
Yeah, well, ultimately, we want to be a catalyst for industry action, and we want to have our dollars and resources go towards the relevant things that are holding this next phase of development back, right? I mentioned the funding opportunities, and I encourage all of you to stay engaged with Department of Energy solicitations. If you're not signed up for the newsletters and notices for when new funding opportunities are available, please do that. Go to the DOE website and sign up for those. We need good applicants for those investments, and we also need applicants for the loan programs authority that I mentioned the Energy Dominance Financing has, as well as the partnerships at the lab levels. You know, we've got great relations with ERC, as we mentioned, but also companies, and we've got incredible lab space and capabilities that are your labs. they're national labs, and you know, this could also extend to you know, federal land development, right? The Department of Interior, if there's, you know, federal lands that you're aware of that aren't being developed, maybe they're in unique ownership stances, let us know about those. If you've got major energy development projects that align with the president's agenda of energy addition, affordable, reliable, secure, we want to support that. You know, I do want to touch real quick, you mentioned CO2, and we've used CO2 not as a pollutant, but as a commodity. Mm-hmm. And, you know, spending taxpayer dollars to decrease electrical output on the grid to capture CO2 and permanently sequester it is a terrible use of taxpayer dollars. And we believe it should be utilized for net energy positive outcomes. And EOR and EGR is right up that alley, right? And so if we're gonna make those investments and expend the resources to capture the CO2, it is a utility, and we need to be utilizing it for generating more energy production.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to turn to my fellow panel moderator to take the last minute and a half. And any final thoughts, Dr. Harju, on what you've heard, particularly in this public-private collaboration arena?
Well, I mean, at the risk of repeating myself, I mean, it's the space we live in, right? But what I'd like to say is, hey, we've got a wonderful team of scientists and engineers at ERC. We're very fortunate to have, you know, really some of the world's premier companies that work with us on a daily basis and work with us in that collaborative space, and really our energy department, you know, as a long partner over that entire period of time. State of North Dakota with the foresight to do the things that you know your team and our team did together over, you know, the last quarter of a century, Lynn. I mean, the leadership of our state, the political leadership of our state, if you go back, you know, really 30 plus years, we've had consistent, fantastic leadership from our politicals in the state. It's been phenomenal. And I think many of them are here in the audience, and certainly Senator Hoeven, you know, been just a steadfast champion over all that time. And I think back to the the oil and gas research program, which you, me, Ron Ness brought to Senator Hoeven and then Governor Hoeven. He saw it immediately, right? Introduced it as an industrial commission bill to our legislature. Fantastic. So.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for attending our panel session here. If you are half as excited about Bakken 2.0 as I am, then these are the 5 people, 5 key people that you need to be talking to about your innovative ideas and what you'd like to see happen in Bakken 2.0.
Lynn,
go ahead.
Lynn, I think it's 6.
6.
Oh,
You're on the team, buddy.
Okay.
1, 2, 3,
All right.
6, yeah.
So please help me thank our panelists. Thank you very much for investing your time and your energy in talking to us about Bakken 2.0.
Thank you.
Thank you.